Transit 55 of Gene Keys is taking us into incredible sense of liberation through becoming more aware of our shadow of victimization that will lead us into the gift and also divine gift of freedom. It's one of the Gene Keys that has the gift and the divine gift of the same frequency of freedom, of this complete liberation of selves. And this feels like an ultimate goal of all the discoveries of our shadows, of any shadow that we are encountering, is to liberate ourselves, to free ourselves from this shadow. But how do we do this? Is through the process of transformation, not simply abandoning that shadow, not simply putting it into a box, like a Pandora box for a while, but constantly paying attention to how this shadow expresses itself in our lives. And the work with this specific Gene Key for me personally is, of course, an ongoing work. And I think it has been beautifully described, and it will help me to describe this Gene Key a little bit more through this example that I found in Gene Key's book by Richard Rudd. And he brings this example of transformation of a nymph into a dragonfly. So before dragonfly, like a butterfly, becomes its own full expression of this being that she is, dragonfly, she is a little nymph. And they are like, she's a little cocoon. And nymph, the cocoon, the future dragonfly expression, and dragonfly are actually almost separately two different entities. They have different physiology, they have different way of feeding themselves, because nymphs, they live in the water and they are predators. So they feed on other living creatures and other living beings. And then once the dragonfly transforms, she becomes pretty much the vegan sort of creature, where she doesn't eat any more meat. So I thought that was fascinating, how just physiology of this whole entire creature changes. And also the way that the transformation goes is very unique and interesting. And nymph comes out of the water of its natural environment and climbs up onto a stem of a grass, of some water plant. And under the influence of sun and the air, it cracks and comes out as a little dragonfly. So I thought this incredible trust that the nymph has in its own process of becoming a dragonfly is so unique, is so exemplary in a way, is that all we need really for this true sense of freedom is to follow this small nudges of inspiration, these small whispers of our inspiration, of our intuition, and see where it leads us. And work with our shadows, work with our fear frequencies, however they express themselves. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, it doesn't have to be this ongoing, overwhelming process of constantly trying to better yourself, constantly trying to do something about yourself and about your life. It's simply taking one little step, like this little nymph that leads its life, and just know that something is about to happen. And then one day allows her physiology to take her onto the stem, where one day she will crack open her little cocoon and will come out as a dragonfly, as an incredibly different being. So as much as a lot of us out there are very passionate about the work of self-understanding and the work of self-transformation, I think it's also very, very important to remember and trust the universe, knowing that universe really, like Einstein said, that God doesn't play dice, right? That it's not everything has its own sense. Everything is for its purpose. There's nothing that happens here that is accidental in this universe, in this life. So deeply relaxing into our fears, and trusting in our fears, and knowing that they are a certain purpose. Our fears, our shadows have a certain purpose. And the moment we start doing that, this is our first steps towards the freedom, towards our understanding of how to free ourselves. And what are these practical steps for us to work with our victimization shadows, with our victim mentality that is deeply, deeply rooted in us? And it really is fascinating to see the different ways that this shadow takes simply within my own work, within my own self-transformation work, realizing how this shadow mutates and moves to the realities or into the concepts where I thought I was fully free from that shadow there. And I think one of the major and the biggest steps for me personally was implementation of the mental wording or play or thought, reflecting on the question, why things happening for me? Not why this is happening to me, but why is this happening for me? And more see how things in my reality bringing me the gift of understanding. They literally, whatever situations they are, however challenging the situations are, they are carrying in themselves the gift of remembering, the gift of understanding, the gift of learning something about myself, something about my environment, something about transformation. It is providing probably me the tools of learning this alchemy of transforming my victim reality into the state of freedom. And on the bigger picture scale, I would like to remind us all that when we are working with our shadows, when we are working with our victim shadows to free ourselves, we are actually giving this incredible surge of energy, surge of inspiration, and in a way allow others dive deeper into their own freedom, because it's such a frequency that propels everything around us into the state of beingness of freedom, this great grand liberation of all and everyone around us. Definitely, it's not a small work. It's definitely is a grand gene key to reflect upon. And I am inviting us to reflect and practice and find more practical applications on working with our own victimization mentality on a regular basis, noticing how rewarding this work is, how it really creates huge transformation of our reality, because that transformation is being deeply, deeply seated in our minds, then into our bodies, and then into our genes. And that will eventually help us to transform our societies, our planet, the way that we set our economies and education system and government, so many things that are literally depending on our individual way of understanding victimhood and understanding how to free ourselves from from our victimhood shadows. Happy and meaningful reflections and contemplations on freedom. And thank you for watching and for listening.